Thank you so much for having me here today at this panel. I'm excited to be here and be a part of this discussion. My name is Tracy Teal. I'm the Executive Director of Dryad, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Dryad as an organization and as a platform today. So first, Dryad is a nonprofit, and our vision is to promote a world where research data is openly available, integrated with the scholarly literature, and routinely reused to create knowledge. We are a curated generalist repository. We've been in existence since 2010. And since then, we've interacted with more than 100,000 researchers, published more than 36,000 data sets, with researchers across 2,100 different institutions and 1,200 academic journals. So we've worked really broadly with the community and institutions and partners throughout our time as an organization. And last year, we published almost 8,000 data sets. So I want to talk about this in the context of this panel about trusted and community standards-based data publishing and how we apply that in our organization and in our technology. So trust, as I'm sure we've already heard, stands for transparency, responsibility, user focus, sustainability, and technology. And I want to talk about this in the context of the technology, but as well as the organizational structure. So on the technology side for Dryad, Dryad is built on Merit, which is a Core Trust Seal certified repository. The data sets are preserved indefinitely and replicated across geography. All of our data sets are published CC0, so they're free for use and redistribution. And we have an API that allows access to the database, so people can get their data sets or use them in a reuse context. And so it really makes it open for people to be able to use, which is sort of threaded throughout this trust. So when we talk about the trust, it's really not sort of one thing goes with one word. They're really all connected to each other. Organizationally, we are a nonprofit, a 501c3, and our own organization with our own governance, our own board. We just this last year committed and did an audit around the principles of openly scholarly infrastructure, which other organizations in the space, including Crossref and DataCite, have gone through as well. And we have a scientific advisory committee that really keeps us connected to the research community and helps provide advice on platform as well as curation, which I'll talk a little bit more about. What I really want to focus on is the U in trust, because that has really been important since the founding of Dryad and continues to guide a lot of our decisions and work. And one of the things we start with is trying to make it easy for the researcher to upload and be guided through adding in their metadata in their data, because we know that researchers are not often as familiar with the data publishing process, don't know what information to include. And so we try to guide authors through that process. So they add the metadata and then they can add their files. They can do that either from their computer or from a URL, which is increasingly important as data sets are getting bigger. They're often being stored in cloud locations. And we can take up to 300 gigabytes per data set. The other thing that we really focus on is using community-based standards. So the great thing about that is that researchers have come together, developed consensus around these standards. And so they have already been sort of developed and vetted by these communities that we work with. Some examples are ORCID, we use ORCID ID for login. ROAR, we use that for institutions. Make Data Count, we use for the metrics, views, downloads, and citations. So not only are these metrics or different resources that have been vetted by the community, also using them broadly and consistently across different locations is really helpful for the researchers themselves, for them to be able to track what it is that they're doing, or for institutions to know. So it really creates that PID network that allows things to be tracked and work together within the ecosystem. And that does go to integrations and partnerships. So we really work with like-minded organizations. We don't want to reinvent things. We want to complement each other's strengths in the space. And so one of the key ones that we just launched is a partnership with Zenodo. So that you can come to Dryad, you can upload your data, but you can also upload your software. And that software will go to Zenodo, and where it will get the appropriate software license. So that is good for software practices and software citation, as well as providing an easy interface for researchers to not have to figure out all the different places they need to go, but be able to come one place and be able to be walked through that process. We also work with publishers. So you saw we work with a lot of journals. We know that researchers are often publishing data sets at the time of manuscript submission. And we have some integrations going on with some of the publishing platforms. Then on the reuse side, that's really important and trust and fair. That API does allow a lot of different workflow integrations for things like our OpenSci and Jupyter notebooks, so that researchers can use the data from Dryad within the environment that they're working on for data analysis. And finally, we have an important partnership with the Data Curation Network. So the Data Curation Network is a network of institutions and us within the United States that are focused on curation and curation practices. So we have a shared pool of curators where we can curate data sets for each other if there's specific expertise or kind of software that we need across different institutions. So it really empowers the organization as a whole to have access to more expertise. But also importantly, it's really a community of practice where we can talk to each other about curation practices. And so our curation practices come from this curated framework that was developed in the Data Curation Network. And so for both the metadata and the data. So that not only is great guidance for repositories, but also allows kind of more of a shared perspective across institutional repositories. And we really work with institutional repositories as well. We know Dryad is not the right place for every data set. So we really want to work with institutions and domain-specific repositories to make sure that the data ends up in the place that's most appropriate for that data type. And really connect with the people that have the expertise. Because as we grow in data publishing, the people surrounding that work are going to be increasingly important, and already really seeing the impact of the Data Curation Network. So that's some highlights around how we think about trust at Dryad. And I'm looking forward to the rest of this panel and any questions. Thanks so much.